I can't talk today. Hey guys, welcome to another Frida Friday. Thank you so much for watching my video from last week. It got a really good response from so many of you. I know that not a lot of people left comments down below or comments on my Instagram, but my DMs were popping and a lot of you slid all the way in, which I fully welcome sometimes, and just let me know about your experiences, that you're also going through, you know, a very big transition or just trying to figure life out, which, to be honest, we are all trying to do slowly but surely. So last week was about growth and transition, and it's all got to do with personal development, and this week is also kind of in that similar or same vein, except it's got to do with current affairs. So I also definitely believe, especially for myself, that keeping up to date with current affairs, sometimes pop culture too, I mean, it's my job to do that, so I naturally, you know, gravitate towards that anyway, really has so much to tell us about, you know, the human condition and human behavior, and how a lot of people think or feel about, could be trivial things or it could be really serious things about, you know, the state of the nation. And something that happened these past couple of days that I want to bring up is the Aziz Ansari case. I know, I felt the same deep disappointment when it happened. I think that on the path of self-care, there definitely has to be a level of consciousness that you have to reach on the daily. You have to constantly, you know, be aware of yourself, be aware of other people around you, and I know the process can be very exhausting, but it's very rewarding. So back to Aziz Ansari. It really broke my heart when the news about him post Golden Globes came up, because he definitely is just one of my favorites. I love the space that he occupies in Hollywood, where often what you see, and I know that a little bit more diversity has been on the rise lately, but for the most part what you see is the same sort of narrative, the same sort of images getting thrown at you, and we consume this stuff mindlessly, which really for me personally has been so damaging to my growth and to my self-perception. So when he came up with his Netflix original series called Master of None, I was like, yes, Aziz, do the damn thing, you know? It just was such a great contribution to the conversation of diversity, and I really loved that he was like this awkward, like funny Indian dude who was the main character of a story, which you don't often see outside of Bollywood. I felt the exact same way when Issa Rae came out with her series as well, about, you know, being an awkward black girl. I was like, can relate. So a couple of days before the Golden Globes, he made his stance known along with a couple of other actors that, you know, he's for this Time's Up movement that's been happening. Now last year we saw the movement take form in the hashtag #MeToo, when lots of people across the globe were using that basically as a point of reference for their stories and their experiences when it comes to sexual assault, sexual misconduct, sexual violation. It really picked up, and it was such an important time, I feel, in the feminist movement. And this year we saw it taking form more formally in the form of hashtag Time's Up. Of course, the Times getting on board, and a lot of huge influential names like Oprah, my mother, making their stance known on the entire movement. We all know that Oprah also had a really rough childhood where she was raped, and so where she's coming from is also a very real place. And when it comes to allies, you know, like Aziz for example, I definitely am for it, because I'm like, yes, you should empathize, and you should definitely, you know, open your eyes and open yourself up to the experiences of other people. But then when he does something like what he did a couple of days after, it really makes me raise my eyebrow and kind of wonder about the validity of a lot of allies, and wonder about people who maybe haven't been through these experiences themselves, and how seriously they take these claims. Like, I'm so for these movements where, you know, women are standing up for themselves and refusing to be a victim and refusing to be shamed for something that traditionally they have been. To give you a little bit of context, Aziz Ansari met a 23-year-old photographer at a party. Things were going well, they exchanged numbers, they then started exchanging texts, eventually agreed to meet up. So they met up at a restaurant, and according to the account of the girl, the meal was a very rushed one, because the entire time she could see that Aziz was anticipating what was to come afterwards, of course assuming that having a date would lead to something else. I don't know if that was a power play thing or whether he kind of got the idea from her that that was where the night was going. So they had a very hurried dinner, they went over to his place, and things kind of unfolded for the worst from there onwards. He made her feel extremely uncomfortable and was suggesting many times that they should continue the night, you know, in the dark, in the bedroom, if you get what I'm saying, having sex. She wasn't about that. She said she made it very clear that she did not want to have sex that night, and also through her non-verbal communication it was quite clear that he made her uncomfortable. You know, he kept doing really inappropriate things and kept kind of like coming on to her very strongly. And I think when I read the story, where I was like, you know, this has happened to me before. If I spoke to my girlfriends, they would say the same thing. If she probably had taken this conversation to her friends, they'd be like, what is the fuss about? You know, we've all been there. And these thoughts consumed me for a long time, and usually when I make up my mind about something, I'm like, that's it, let's move on. But it really was nagging me because I started to feel like, there's a reason why so many women are like, we've been there and this should be spoken about. It's not okay. You know, when somebody says no, whether it's non-verbal in their body language or verbally saying, I'm not okay with this is not okay, you should take that as a form of consent. And it should be known that consent is not up for debate. Me saying no should not be a challenge to you to then try to persuade, coerce, and convince me into having sex with you or doing anything else with you that I don't feel comfortable doing. The boundaries that she had set out were crossed. What he probably saw was one of those overplayed tropes of push and pull, you know? A girl says no, ha ha ha, and you kind of see that as an invitation to be like, okay, I'll show you. And you pull and pull and pull. The girl pushes, you pull, the girl pushes, you pull. Sometimes it ends up, you know, in the bed. Other times it ends up on a taxi drive home with you in complete shock and in tears. So this week on Everyday Feminism, I came across an article written by Sean Ferguson, and it was about how non-traditional rape narratives are very important. And what I took from that, whether we're talking about rape or sexual misconduct of any form, because there is a spectrum of things that could fall under that umbrella, is that there's no blueprint to violation. And often when there is no blueprint to something, it doesn't really validate your experience, and you kind of look around and go, no one else has experienced this thing that I have. But there's so many people that have. She said, for one, that, you know, she was violated or raped by a woman, which is kind of a non-traditional way of looking at rape, what we hear from the media and also from movies, which is so oversaturated with the same old trope about, you know, the mentally ill, about black men, or even a stranger, when many times it's people that we know, it's people that we're in contact with, it's work colleagues, it's you know, siblings, it's aunties, it's uncles, it's people that are definitely within our space. Now I'm gonna bring this home a little bit and tell you a bit about my own Me Too story that happened last year. Now, I was in a foreign country and just had wrapped up an incredible project with an amazing team that I loved so dearly. So it was my final day in the city. We were all grabbing lunch together in their workplace, and it was drawing closer to the time where I had to say goodbye, leave, hug everyone, I'm a hugger, and say goodbye. So I did so. The only person of comfort I had around with me was my partner, who was sitting right next to me. I hugged a lot of people and eventually got to a point of hugging a very particular man, hugged him, and then he grabbed my butt, which really wasn't okay and left me completely shaken. I pulled back, was so confused because I thought that surely somebody else would have seen what just went down. Surely my partner, who was standing next to me, would have noticed and was coming from behind me with, you know, one of those. None of that happened. I pulled away, turned around, walked on and continued hugging everybody else. It took me 6 to 12 months later to actually address the issue and kind of take steps to find out what I can do about it. At some point, I think that I needed to realize that whether it was my own case of violation or, you know, cases of friends or this case of this 23-year-old photographer, time's up. To hear and no further. We can't constantly be defending questionable behavior and behavior that crosses boundaries that you've made very clear to people, or just is within your space of this is my body, nobody else's but mine, and you have no right to touch me. You have no right to look at me in an unsolicited way, to say things to me that I did not ask for. So yes, I was really gutted about this case with Aziz Ansari, especially considering the fact that he just recently made history, being the first male of Asian descent to win an Oscar for his acting role in a TV series. But that doesn't exclude or exempt him from the fact that he can also be so problematic in his personal decisions and personal behavior. I do think that this conversation needs to be had, because in some ways we all have this internalized misogyny, and we don't question this kind of behavior until certain things like this come up and we're like, but wait, there's something that needs to be spoken about here. You know, it got me thinking about my response and the way that I perhaps contribute to rape culture every day, in big ways, in small ways, in any ways really. So I just thought I'd share this with you to hopefully get you thinking about maybe your response to the case, or any other cases when it comes to situations like this where you kind of go, that's no big deal, I've been through that too, but then realize the wrong and realize why it's not okay and why consent is always sexy and never up for debate. So thank you so much for watching another Frida Friday video. Remember to join the conversation below and let me know your experiences perhaps. You can also slide into my inbox if you don't want to be public about your experience, but I definitely am here and open to hearing anything that you have to say. Please give this video a thumbs up. I don't know why I keep doing this, but I figured a visual representation might actually help some of you to do that. It really does help me. And also remember to subscribe to my channel. So let's continue growing and becoming.